He told me years later that for weeks, he was convinced a small animal had crawled into the trunk of his car and died. He searched everywhere for the source of the putrid, overwhelming smell. He checked the engine, under the seats, tore the trunk apart. The truth was much sweeter and infinitely stickier. The smell wasn't from a dead animal. It was the smell of his betrayal, left to rot and fester in the summer heat. It was the smell of 4 dozen chocolate Easter eggs smashed into a gooey, sticky morass in the pockets of every shirt and every pair of pants he owned. And I was the one who put them there. It happened about 6 years ago. I was pregnant with our second child, and one night, my husband simply never came home. He was leaving me for my best friend. In the blur of shock and grief that followed, I don't remember much, but I do remember packing his things. And I remember the eggs.
Before that night, our life was a carefully curated picture of suburban happiness. We had our son, a bright, bubbly 5-year-old, and a daughter on the way. We had a home with a small garden. We hosted barbecues in the summer. We were that family. My husband, Mark, was a charming, successful man who knew how to make everyone laugh. And my best friend, Jessica, was my other half. She was the one I called for everything. She had been there when our son was born. She was the first person I told when I found out I was pregnant again. We'd spent countless evenings drinking wine on my patio, talking about our futures, our husbands, our dreams. Our lives were so deeply intertwined, I couldn't imagine one without the other. The 3 of us were a unit. Looking back, that was the problem, wasn't it?
I remember the weekend we painted the nursery for our coming daughter, the 3 of us. Mark had carefully taped the edges of the walls. I was picking out stencils of little stars, and Jessica was right there with a roller in her hand, her hair tied up in a messy bun, laughing as she got a smudge of lavender paint on Mark's nose. She was going to be the baby's godmother. We called her Auntie Jess. She would bring over little onesies she'd bought or books she wanted to read to the baby. She was more than a friend. She was family. We were building our future together, a perfect, happy triangle of love and support. The memory is so clear, so painfully pure, that it's hard to reconcile it with the rot that was festering just beneath the surface. The signs were there, of course. They always are. Little red flags that seem insignificant at the time, but become giant, flapping banners in hindsight. There were the late nights Mark started working, attributed to a big project. The way he guarded his phone, suddenly setting a passcode when he never had before. The way Jessica would avoid my gaze sometimes or offer compliments that felt off, insincere. There was an evening, about a month before the end, when the 3 of us were out for dinner. I went to the restroom, and when I came back, the air between them was thick with the silence that felt heavy and charged. They both jumped when I reached the table, their smiles too bright, too quick. I felt a flicker of unease, but brushed it away. It was Mark. It was Jessica. I trusted them. To suspect them would have felt like a betrayal in itself. The irony is sickening. The night he didn't come home was a Tuesday. He was supposed to be home by 7. At 8, I called. It went straight to voicemail. At 9, I called Jessica to see if she'd heard from him. "No, sweetie," she'd said, her voice sounding strained. "I'm sure he's just held up. Don't worry." Don't worry. I spent the next few hours pacing the house, my pregnant belly a heavy, anxious weight. I called hospitals, I called his friends. Nothing. Finally, at 2 in the morning, my phone rang. It was him. I picked it up, ready to unleash a torrent of fear and anger, but his voice stopped me cold. It was flat, devoid of emotion. "I'm not coming home," he said. "Not tonight, not ever." I couldn't process the words. "What are you talking about? Where are you?" And then he delivered the final, fatal blow.
I'm with Jessica. I love her. I'm sorry. He was sorry. He said he was sorry. And then he hung up, leaving me standing in the dark, silent house with the life we had built turning to ash around me. The two most important people in my life, gone, having chosen each other over me, over our children. The betrayal was so absolute, so complete, it felt less like a heartbreak and more like a cessation of life itself.
The days that followed are a colorless fog in my memory. I was functioning, but I wasn't there. My mind had retreated to a safe, numb place, leaving my body to go through the motions. Get up, get my son ready for kindergarten, force down a piece of toast, cry, sleep, repeat. The world felt muffled, like I was hearing it through a thick wall of glass. My son's laughter, the television, the ringing phone, it was all just distant noise. I was a ghost in my own life, pregnant with a child whose father had abandoned us for the woman I had called my sister. The cruelty of it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The worst moments were when reality pierced through the fog, usually in the form of a question from my son, Leo. One morning, as I was tying his shoelaces, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes and asked, "Mommy, is Daddy on a work trip with Auntie Jess? When are they coming home to see the baby's room?" The question shattered me. I had to physically bite the inside of my cheek to keep from breaking down. I forced a smile that felt like cracking glass and told him they were very busy, but they loved him very much. The lie tasted like acid. Having to protect his innocence while my own was being so brutally destroyed was a unique form of torture. It was in those moments that I felt the full, crushing weight of my new reality. He sent a text a few days later. "I'll come get my things on Saturday. Please have them packed." He couldn't even face me. He wanted me to perform the final act of erasing him from our home myself. So I began the task. I moved through our bedroom like a robot, opening drawers, pulling his clothes from the closet. Each item was a landmine of memory. The shirt he wore on our first date. The sweater I bought him for Christmas. The jeans that still held the faint scent of his cologne. I folded everything, my movements mechanical, my mind blessedly blank. I refused to let myself feel. Feeling was a luxury I couldn't afford. If I started, I knew I would shatter, and who would be there to take care of my son? While emptying his nightstand, my fingers brushed against a small, worn photo booth strip tucked inside a book. It was from years ago, taken at a summer carnival. The 4 photos showed the 3 of us, me, Mark, and Jessica, crammed together, making silly faces. In the last frame, they were both kissing me on the cheek. We looked so young, so happy, so utterly unbreakable. Seeing that tangible proof of our friendship, of the life he had just incinerated, was like a physical blow. The numbness cracked, and for a solid minute I couldn't breathe. I just knelt on the floor, clutching that tiny strip of paper, gasping for air in the ruins of my life. I then tossed it into the trash bag along with his other things. It was all garbage now. I piled his neatly folded clothes on the bed. The closet was half empty now. The drawers were bare. It was almost done. I walked into the living room to get the garbage bags, and that's when I saw them. On the kitchen counter, sitting in bright, cheerful baskets, were the remnants of Easter. It had been just a week or 2 earlier, a happy day filled with family and an egg hunt in the garden for our son. Mark and I had bought way too many chocolate eggs, as we always did. There were at least 4 dozen of them left, a vibrant, mocking monument to a family that no longer existed.
I stood there staring at the colorful foil wrappers, and in this silent gray fog of my trauma, a single clear thought emerged. It wasn't born of rage, which was too exhausting an emotion to summon. It was something else. A spark of dark, surreal creativity. A primal, almost mischievous impulse. I looked at the pile of his clothes on the bed, and I looked at the mountain of chocolate eggs. A slow, cold idea began to form. I wasn't going to throw his things out. I wasn't going to burn them. I was going to give them back to him, exactly as he asked. But I was going to add a little something extra. This was my rock bottom, the moment I realized I had absolutely nothing left to lose. And in that moment of pure emotional devastation, I found an incredibly petty and incredibly perfect purpose. I started with a pair of his expensive jeans. I picked up a bright blue foil-wrapped chocolate egg, held it over the back pocket, and brought my fist down. The crack of the thin chocolate shell was the loudest sound in the silent house. It was deeply, profoundly satisfying. I peeled back the foil and shoved the sticky, crushed egg deep into the pocket, smearing the melting chocolate and gooey filling into the denim. Then I did the other pocket. Then I took one of his designer dress shirts, the kind he was so proud of, and I repeated the process. I took an egg, crushed it in my hand until it was a warm, messy pulp, and scraped it into the chest pocket. I didn't just drop them in, I made sure they were smashed thoroughly. I worked methodically, like a soldier assembling a weapon. Each item of clothing got the same treatment. Pants pockets, shirt pockets, the pockets of his jackets. 4 dozen eggs. One by one they were sacrificed for my quiet, sticky revenge. It was a ritual. With every cracked shell, I felt a tiny piece of my power returning. He had taken my past and my future, but this act, this secret, belonged only to me. It was a messy, sticky, childish act, but it was also the first choice I had made for myself since he had left. It was a reclamation. I was no longer just the victim. I was the architect of his future olfactory misery. As I continued my strange assembly line of destruction, something shifted inside me. The repetitive motion, unwrap, crush, smear, fold, became a form of meditation. The screaming chaos in my head began to quiet down, replaced by a singular, sharp focus. The fog of trauma started to lift, not because the pain was gone, but because I had given it a task. I was channeling all the grief, all the rage, all the unbearable injustice into this one controllable act. I wasn't just destroying his clothes. I was destroying the paralysis that had gripped me for days. This wasn't just revenge on him. It was an act of survival for me. The most important part of the process was what I did next. After desecrating each garment, I folded it neatly. I smoothed out the wrinkles, made crisp creases, and placed it gently into a black garbage bag. The contrast was beautiful. The outward appearance of care and compliance, hiding the sticky, rotting chaos within. It was a perfect metaphor for our marriage. Bag after bag, I filled them with his chocolate-bombed wardrobe. By the time I was done, the sun was coming up. My hands were sticky, and the smell of artificial sweetness hung in the air. I looked at the row of tidy black bags by the front door and felt nothing. Not happiness, not anger, not even satisfaction.
just a quiet, hollow emptiness. The task was complete. His physical presence was finally, completely gone. He came that afternoon, as promised. He texted from the curb, outside. I opened the door, dragged the bags onto the porch, and went back inside without looking at him. I watched through the window as he loaded them into the trunk of his car, his new life packed away in black plastic. When he drove away, I didn't cry. A strange sense of calm settled over me. The storm was over. The wreckage was all around me, yes, but the house was quiet. It was mine. The long, brutal journey of rebuilding was just beginning. I would have to give birth alone. I would have to raise 2 children on my own. It would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. But as he drove away with his rotting, chocolate-filled future, I knew with absolute certainty that I was going to be okay. After his car disappeared, I walked back into the kitchen, the scene of my crime. I cleaned up the discarded foil wrappers and wiped the sticky residue from the counter until it gleamed. Then I walked into the lavender nursery, the room that the 3 of us had painted together. For a moment, the memory threatened to overwhelm me. Then my eyes landed on the star stencils I had bought. I picked one up, went to the wall above the crib, the wall Jessica had painted, and I peeled off a single, perfect star. I didn't replace it. I left the faint, star-shaped outline on the wall. It was a scar, a reminder that something had been taken away, but that I was the one who would decide what the final picture looked like. It was the first day of the rest of my life. Life moved on. As years went by, the sharp edges of the betrayal began to dull. For the sake of our children, Mark and I managed to forge a new kind of relationship. It wasn't friendship, not really, but it was a functional, respectful partnership in parenting. We attended parent-teacher conferences together, coordinated birthday parties, and managed to be civil. The raw hatred had faded into a scar that only ached on rainy days. He and Jessica didn't last, which was a surprise to absolutely no one but them. He was single again, and we were just 2 people trying to raise our kids the best we could. About 3 years after that fateful night, we were at our son's soccer game, sitting side by side in lawn chairs. We were making small talk when he suddenly got a strange look on his face. "You know," he said, turning to me, "I never told you what happened with those clothes I picked up from the house." I felt a smile twitch at the corner of my lips, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh?" I asked, feigning mild curiosity. "Yeah," he said, shaking his head. "It was the weirdest thing. A few days after I put them in my car, this horrible smell started. It was god-awful. I thought a rat had died in my engine or something." He went on to describe in vivid detail how he had spent weeks driving around in a car that smelled like a decomposing animal. He'd had it detailed twice. He'd searched every inch of it. The smell just got worse and worse, especially as the summer got hotter. He said he was embarrassed to drive anyone around. Finally, one weekend, he decided to unpack the clothes, which had been sitting in the trunk, stewing in their own chocolatey filth for the better part of a month. He described opening the first garbage bag and being hit with a wave of stench so powerful it made him gag. He reached in, pulled out a shirt, and felt something wet and sticky in the pocket. "I thought it was blood at first," he said, his eyes wide with the memory. "I thought some animal had gotten in there, but it was brown and gooey. And then I found the bits of foil." He looked at me, a slow dawn of comprehension spreading across his face. He had never put it together until that very moment. I just sat there, a serene smile on my face. He stared at me for a long moment, and then he started to laugh. It wasn't an angry laugh. It was a deep, genuine belly laugh of pure disbelief. "You didn't," he gasped, wiping a tear from his eye. "You put Easter eggs in my clothes?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. I started laughing too. We sat there on the sidelines of our son's soccer game, howling with laughter like a pair of old friends. The absurdity of it, the pettiness of it, the sheer, unexpected genius of it. When our laughter finally subsided, he shook his head again, a real, non-sarcastic smile on his face. "I had to throw everything away," he said. "The smell never came out. Every single piece of clothing was ruined." He paused, then looked at me. "I deserved that," he said. "I 100% deserved that." And in that moment, with that shared laughter and his simple admission, the last little bit of the wound finally healed. The revenge was sweet, but the closure was even sweeter.
When your life implodes, you enter a strange state of survival. You do what you have to do to get through the next minute, the next hour. Sometimes that means taking care of your children, and sometimes it means smashing 4 dozen chocolate eggs into the pockets of your cheating husband's favorite shirts. Healing isn't a straight line. It's a messy, unpredictable journey. But every now and then, it starts with the satisfying crack of a chocolate shell and a secret that makes you smile years later.